Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info. The latest production from acclaimed theatre company RashDash, Future Bodies, has been produced in collaboration with Unlimited Theatre and Home Manchester as a trailblazer event for the 2018 Manchester Science Festival, after which it will be moving on to Newcastle and Huddersfield. During rehearsals at home, I managed to speak to RashDash co-founder Helen Goalen, who is co-directing the production, and I asked her to explain a bit about what this show is about.
So the show is called Future Bodies, and it is looking at technology, human enhancement technology specifically, and how that will affect us, our bodies, our relationships in the future as we go on. And it's really about examining what it means to be human, and whether we will still continue to be human if we start to get brain implants, and if we start to imagine a world in which our minds could be uploaded onto a different substrate, like a computer. Does that still mean we're human? Is our body essential to be human, or are we more our brain than our body? So it's exploring the brain-body dichotomy through technology.
Right. Those are questions that often bother me as well. Things like, if you do save the brain or save the thoughts in the brain and then you upload them again later, are you the same person inside, or do you just think you're the same person inside? There are some quite knotty problems there, aren't there?
There are.
So these have come out in rehearsals, I assume, because you devise the work, do you?
Well, this has been a particular process that's gone through some devising in a group that was made up of RashDash and Unlimited. So it was the three members of RashDash and John Spooner and Claire Duffy from Unlimited. And that was a combination of writing and devising time. And then what happened was that Claire and Abby then wrote a script drawing on all of that work that we'd done, but also introducing lots of new stuff as well. And then Abby and I as directors have taken that script into the rehearsal room and have been working with physical devising methods to create the physical material in the show, but the script is actually set. So it's brought up lots of questions in the room, but it's not something we've been devising with the actors.
Right, so that's a set process that you use. The devising process is to develop a conventional script, in a sense, that you still go away and learn and then rehearse, more or less like a conventional play that you will have picked off the shelf.
And I think for us the process of making work is different for every single show, and this felt like the most appropriate process for this collaboration between the two companies, and also given the timescale of rehearsals that we have now, because we only have 3 weeks to make the show. Having done a lot of thinking and a lot of development and imagined lots of different versions of what it could be, the time to actually make it is actually quite small.
3 weeks is very short, even just for rehearsal.
Totally.
So there is some writing in that 3 weeks as well, even if you've had all the thoughts before, and you're still writing, are you?
Well, no, we went into rehearsal with a script, but the script is getting adapted. We're making little cuts and changes, and but sort of what you would do with any piece of new writing, really. Yeah,
I've seen one of your shows before. It was a very physical show. Is that your technique? Is it a very... Well, I actually saw a little bit of rehearsal there. It looked very physical. So it's not just about the words. There is a physical approach.
It's not just about the words. There are a lot of words, actually, in the show, and probably more than is in an average RashDash show. But that feels like a really important thread through the piece as we think about the brain and the cerebral way of thinking and talking and language and how that's come to be sculpted, and also look at what we are when we're just our bodies. So it's the sort of collision of those two things that is really what the show is structured out of.
Yeah. These are very hot topics as well, really, aren't they? This idea of adding things to the body, because we do it all the time. We carry around devices that help us remember things and help us communicate in ways that we couldn't just ourselves. So have you been looking at where we cross a line? There is a point where we cross a line where it's not the human anymore, it's the devices talking to each other. So where have you looked at with that?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because I think we like to think right now that we're not, that we are just totally human and our devices are separate. But so many things that we need to remember we upload on our devices, like most people's calendars and notes and memos and sort of everything that, of course, people have been, writing stuff down for years and years and years, and that's not a new thing. But it's almost like we're sort of sharing a mind with our devices. It can feel like sometimes. For me, a line is crossed when you start to insert things in the body. Like you can get chips now that you can insert in your hand you can get like you can open your car with your chip, for example, or you could open your front door with your chip. And I think as soon as something goes into the body, that definitely feels very different to me. And that is something that we're exploring in the show, about how much control you can have over your body if you are actually inserting like a brain implant that helps you remember more accurately and improves your cognitive function. What does that mean for us being human?
Yeah, because Socrates famously was against writing things down because he said that made people lazy, remembering and thinking, which is why everything we know about Socrates comes via Plato. And so that idea of technology dumbing us down goes back thousands of years. So we're using technology all the time. So the line is crossed when something is doing more than, because we insert like a pacemaker into us, which is a device. Well, that's a dumb device that just creates a charge over and over again. So it's something that enhances what we're doing. But there's also an economic argument for that, in there, that it's only the rich who are going to get this sort of thing. Yeah,
absolutely. And that is one of the things that we touch on in the show as well. The capitalist element of, well, everything that we do, but technology being a huge factor within that. And yes, it potentially creating even more division in our society.
Yeah, and where does sport go if you can have whatever you want, whatever abilities you want programmed into you?
Yeah.
There are lots of questions, aren't there?
Yeah, lots of questions. But then it's complicated, isn't it? Because the idea of being born with ability is also quite a complex notion, because obviously people are born with lots of differences in terms of their state, their wealth and status and hierarchy is very much embedded in it. We're not sort of starting from an equal playing field to begin with.
No. One thing I noticed when I was watching Two-Man Show is how well you balance the argument, because although you're a feminist group, feminist theatre group, that's how you market yourself. As a man sat in the audience, I didn't feel alienated, I didn't feel got at, because you were putting arguments from the other side, not as this is the villain, this is the wrong argument, argued convincingly. So are you doing the same for technology? Are you also looking, you're not demonising technology, are you? Or are you?
I don't think we're demonising it, no. I think that
fiction often does, right from Frankenstein onwards.
Yeah, of
the
course.
idea of technology being an evil that's bound to end in disaster is a common one in fiction, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're raising questions about it, but I think there are some things that we find really exciting about what technology could do as well. So I think that there is a balance of argument in there. Like the show has tried to be reflective of how we experience the subject matter, but actually, because there have been a lot of people involved in the making of this show, there isn't one homogenous answer for that. Like everyone feels slightly differently about it. And actually John, who instigated the project in the first place, is hugely excited by technology and all of the things that it could be and all of the things that it could do. And yeah, he's a real kind of advocate for it.
Right.
And then probably Abby and me are slightly more sceptical of it. I think Claire sits somewhere in the middle of that, who's the other writer. So there's lots of different opinions going on. So I think that the show goes some way in which to balance those.
Yeah, we were all looking through your own devices and looking at them differently when you were looking at the ideas behind it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, can never look at your iPhone in the same way again.
So the company, you've been going for how long have you been going the company?
So we formed in 2009. so 8 years ago.
And over that time, where has the work come from? Have the ideas come from you? Have they been commissions? Has that changed at all?
A combination of things, really, but generally speaking, the ideas for shows comes from the things that we're interested in at the time, things that we're passionate about, things that we're thinking about, conversations that we're having with other people. They sort of arise out of that, really.
Yeah, and you come to each other and say, is there a show in this?
Yeah, and I think this one is different because the subject matter was inspired from shows that Unlimited had already started investigating and started making, and they're a company with a history of examining science and thinking about how science works with culture and all of that stuff, which is a whole different avenue for us to explore.
So you've got a collision of two very different companies, and the ideas have come from that.
Yeah.
So where's the story through this? Is there actually some kind of a narrative that links all these ideas together?
There is a narrative, but it's not a story narrative.
Right.
So the first part of the show is all about introducing the world of the future and all of the different ways in which technology has changed us and just our daily lives, really. So it sort of plunges you into that in a way that is really quite overwhelming because there's lots of short scenes that follow one after the other.
Yeah.
So that's kind of reflective of there's too much information, there's too much to learn, there's too much to know about and think about. That's kind of where we're at. Yeah. And that's set like away in the future, imagining kind of 50 years in the future. And then we take another step much further into the future, like 100 years or so, and we keep going further and further in through the second part of the show, which really delves into the emotional world of the subject in much more depth. So we get to really see couples, relationships, how things have changed, what the kind of moral, ethical questions are in this new world. And we get to really sit with those ideas for longer. And then part 3, we go in a totally different direction, which I feel like I'm not going to say too much about because I want to keep some air of mystery for the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, the narrative is more about the forms that we're choosing rather than seeing one story develop.
Right. So some of it's the ideas of speculative fiction, and you're looking at where things are now and then finding a logical way that it might go in the future.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a huge amount of imagination and creative license taking with the whole show, but it's come from a place of real research as well.
Yeah.
So yes, it's sort of taking an idea and going, well, what if this happened? And what if there was a young person who's dying in a relationship and they are told that they can be part of a trial that means that their brain will be uploaded onto a computer, which means that in a way they would still be able to exist. What the hell would that mean for that person, for that couple? So yes, it's taking lots of different elements that do exist and are being created and using our imaginations to think about what might happen.
And those relationships as well. I mean, who are they preserving that dying or dead person for? Is it for them, or is it for themselves because they don't want to miss them?
Yeah.
I can tell you've thought through all this.
No, well, it is very interesting. There's just lots of complex, difficult stuff that comes up, and my initial feeling is, well, of course I wouldn't want to exist in that kind of a way, like that's not really existing. But then what's the alternative? And
I noticed on your website you say that as you go on, your company or the individuals that make up your company are more political and more radical. How's that been reflected in the work, do you think?
In this work?
Yeah.
It's an interesting question because I think that in this show we're not making a kind of clear political point. I mean, I think that we're often not actually, because we're often taking something that's quite messy and trying to unpick it and contradicting ourselves as we go along and finding new arguments. And so I think that is definitely a way that we work that probably is in this show. I think that probably the radicalness of the show is the more sort of experimental nature of it. I think that this show could exist in a form that feels much more like a play. Yeah. And I think that was never something that any of us wanted to do. I mean, it is a play. The text is very important. The scenes are very important. But it felt like we needed to explore this in a much more bodily, much more felt way. So I suppose it's that kind of journey through the piece that perhaps feels like a more radical, more different offer. But perhaps the show isn't as overtly political as some of our other pieces of work are, actually.
Right. I mean, at the moment, people are becoming political in a sense because of what's happening around us with the political scene at the moment. But your work is more thoughtful and reflective, perhaps, rather than reacting to immediate events, do you think?
I think so. I think that we're generally taking a subject that is bigger, that has like resonances with some immediate events, but is normally looking at something really quite wide. Yeah. And sometimes we'll go in with a real specificity as well, but we don't tend to kind of take one specific issue and make something about that. It tends to be kind of like looking wide and then looking at something in real detail and then kind of going wide again.
Down on it. So who's your audience? Who are you making the work for? Is it for people who have similar opinions to you? That's often the criticism of political work in particular, that really you're only preaching to people who've got the same opinion. You might be giving them a different way of thinking about it, but you're not really converting anybody. So what do you think?
I mean, I definitely don't think we're trying to convert anyone in this show. I think that we're raising questions, and I hope that people go away and have really interesting conversations about the future and technology and science. And perhaps, I know that it's one of Unlimited's real things that they want to do is to get people more engaged with science and more engaged with the development of technology, because often we just sort of accept it and we don't really question it, and it becomes the norm, and we're not really there going, oh, but hang on, do I actually want this, and what will that mean? So I think that that's really important, and I hope that happens. I hope to reach loads of different kinds of audience members with the show. I know that some scientists are coming, which will be really interesting, because that's not normally a demographic that we have at our shows. I always really like to be surprised by the audience members that we have in. I think that probably our target audience group is sort of maybe early 20s to mid 30s kind of age range, people that are very connected with the arts already and do go and see theatre, but also go and see films and gigs and other art forms. But what I love about making work, and actually that's one of the great things about performing in the work, is getting to meet all your audiences and being hugely surprised by who you get in the door in the first place, and actually the people who really enjoy it sometimes aren't the people that you expect to. So I hope that happens with this show as well, and that we get a diverse age range and all of the other ways. Yeah,
and it must be great to be looking at questions that are bothering you and be able to you're in a position now where you can bring in experts on various things into your rehearsals, I suppose, are you? You can debate these issues with people who are more knowledgeable than you about specific subjects. So that must be great to be able to do that and work it through your art.
Yes, and that's not something that we have done in the rehearsal process, actually. We haven't been bringing experts in to talk. Again, that's largely about the time constraints and needing to kind of deal with the material that's there and just specifically get into that. But during the development process, we did a number of really fun field trips to different departments in at Cambridge University and at UCL, meeting different scientists, going to labs, just kind of getting a sense of that world really, and what the questions are, but also who those people are, and what they're kind of excited about.
So what was it like exploring that world from somebody who comes from the arts? Because the arts and science, they used to be a lot closer together. 100 or more years ago than they are now. Now they are two completely different worlds that don't seem to understand each other very well. So what did that feel like?
I mean, it sort of is a bit like going into another world because of, well, just the concerns and probably just the way in which people think are very different. But for that reason, it's a huge privilege, really, to go in and meet people who are focusing on something entirely different from you, and like people at the top of their game, really specialist. So it was just sort of amazing to just sit and listen and absorb information and then go, well, what do we do with this now? And I think that it was really, those conversations felt very much like that to me, more like us sitting and hearing from them rather than more of a two-way conversation about art and science. I don't think it ever kind of felt like that, really. But but it was fascinating to do.
And you've just absorbed that and tried to bring that out into the work.
Yeah.
So what's it been like working with Home?
It's brilliant working with Home. They're a really great, very supportive venue with amazing facilities, and we've got a lovely rehearsal room, and we've got a great team putting the set together while we're in the rehearsal room, which means that we can be rehearsing in two spaces and we can be getting ourselves used to that set before we go into tech, which is really, really useful.
Luxury.
It is, because often it's a bit of a shock for everyone when suddenly you're in the space, whereas slowly, bit by bit this week, we're going to be getting used to that theatre space and feeling what it's like to be in there, which is brilliant. Yeah,
and then you're taking it, when it's been at Home, you're taking it on to a couple of other venues.
We are, yes, we're taking it to Northern Stage and to the Lawrence Batley in Huddersfield.
Yeah, and then have you got anything else as a company lined up for the future, or is it just you're just concentrating on this for now?
Well, RashDash project, we're not entirely sure what the next project is yet, or I can't really fully say what the next project is yet. But this winter, Abby and I, who are 2/3 of RashDash, are directing a play called Hole at the Royal Court, which is by a writer called Ellie Kendrick, and it's her first play. She's an actor and a writer, and that's what we're going on to do next.
Right, so you're taking just the conventional script and directing that?
We're taking the script, but it ain't conventional.
Okay.
So it's going to have a lot of live music as well, and movement, and it's a really, really exciting show.
And a different type of challenge, I assume.
Totally, yeah.
That was Helen Goalen of RashDash talking about Future Bodies, co-created with Unlimited Theatre, which will be at Home Manchester from the 28th of September to the 13th of October 2018, before touring to Northern Stage in Newcastle from the 16th to the 18th of October, and the Lawrence Batley Theatre in Huddersfield on the 19th of October. For more information, see www.rashdash.co.uk, www.unlimited.org.uk or homemcr.org. You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.